Hello, hello, hello. How are you today? This is Selfcare Sunday. Hello, ladies. This is Tonya from Freedom at the Crossroads, helping women everywhere look better, feel better without the pressure of other people's expectations, getting you off of that altar of OPE, other people's expectations. How are you? It's been a while since our last podcast episode. A number of things going on in the background. The Undomesticated Woman podcast series is now the Undomesticated Woman podcast. So make sure you tune in. Hit the bell at the top of your favorite audio app for the Undomesticated Woman podcast, available on all your favorite audio platforms. This is Freedom at the Crossroads, Balanced Living. How are you doing? Where we talk all issues related to women's health, wellness, self-care, definitely skincare, and so many more topics that matter to us women around the world. Today, I want to get back on to, our prevailing theme that's been going around since the inception of this podcast, actually, and that is self-care as a mode of empowerment for women everywhere around the world. Because at the ultimate center of all of us is this notion of self, this notion of who we were ultimately meant to be. And it's only when we effectively harness who we were meant to be, when we actually fulfill our paths, that we as individuals, as we as human beings are fulfilled and have truly lived a life worth living and a life that's meaningful and impactful. And so I just wanted to come back to this notion of self-care because, again, it doesn't take much for that topic to be confused and conflated with false images and narratives of what constitutes self-care, especially when you look at media and, conventional media in particular. And a lot of the ads and infomercials that are pushed at women. I mean, we are almost spoon-fed this crap about, all these mythological ideas and, visuals about what self-care is without really getting to, the real issue and consequences, intended and otherwise, of self-care. Now, let's bring it right back down to basics. I've said it before, self-care is a radical state because it requires, anytime you have a situation where you are modifying behavior, changing behavior, especially in terms of deep levels, and that requires, activating your mind and really retraining your mind. And that gets radical and that gets really at the deep root of things. And so when you start, really getting into what it means, in terms of self-care, what we mean by self-care, you will understand that this superficial stuff, facials, all of that stuff is pampering. I call that, icing sugar, not even icing sugar on top of any cake or donut you might sprinkle if that's your thing. Because real self-care starts at the mind, and spirit arguably is, intrinsically connected to the spirit, in terms of developing and growing and really uncovering a lot of things, be they psychological or emotional wounds, areas and things that are uncomfortable in us. And that requires going into levels that we don't typically want to go into, or that we typically see as being something that is arduous, requiring a lot of work. And the truth of the matter is, any real meaningful change, any real meaningful growth, and especially anything you want to truly achieve at the real levels, not superficial, but meaningful, deep levels, is going to require discomfort. Look at it. Why can't we get the fact that if it takes real work to get your body physically in shape. You see all this time, a lot of times you see on Instagram all these before and after pictures of people who are at an unhealthy weight and body and all of that, and they transform their body and all of that stuff. That stuff wasn't fun. I mean, at some point it felt good because their body had adapted to it. But when you first start working out, when you first start training, dude, you are in pain and discomfort. Not pain as in, pain related to injury, but pain in terms of discomfort and having to take your body through those changes because you have an ultimate goal of transformation. So why we would think that something that is as pivotal and meaningful and deep as a spiritual and emotional and mental state, why we would think that would be any easier is kind of beyond me. And I always get annoyed and irritated when I see media perpetuating that story, that narrative, because it's not true. But then again, I guess that's also not something that's, you can easily package up and make it marketable and, get a lot of sensational, news about it. Because, otherwise, this kind of stuff, this kind of work is not something that is that popular. It's not truly popular. I mean, if you just look at the media alone, it's not about educating the public, truly educating the public in terms of their options, what to do to make society a more meaningful place. A lot of mainstream media, what you see, conventional media that's been bought up by all these conglomerates and monopolies and oligarchs, is largely pushing a narrative that's not true. It's pushing a narrative of, superficiality and, unicorns, and then, interspersed with sensationalized, ugly parts of human behavior. So, we've reached an age now where people have to really do the deep work themselves. In spite of all the knowledge that technology has made available to all of us, we really got to get back to the old school ways of doing stuff. And that means doing the work. So enough about me ranting on and getting on that platform about this and that and, media and all beating up on the media, because that's not really my intent. My intent is to drive home the fact that self-care is real work. And a lot of it is uncomfortable work. But once you get into it, once you get into the real purpose of it, you begin to feel the good results of it. But I wanted us to get back home in as women, particularly, to understand, self-care is empowering, and it's empowering because it forces us to grow mentally, intellectually, spiritually, and develop strength in a number of areas where we are weak, where we have been conditioned as women to accept our, state or our situation in the world, which is largely one of disempowerment. Let us be real. We live in a very patriarchal society to varying degrees across the globe. And it has in a lot of instances, has ugly consequences as a result of that, where women are, globally, we have the largest numbers in terms of violence perpetuated against us, murder, inadequacies in healthcare, unequal treatment in healthcare, unequal treatment in the workforce. I mean, this is across the board, and it varies to different degrees depending on where you are in the world. Some parts it's uglier than others. Some places it's more overt than others, like in the Middle East, in Africa and all of that. It might be more overt. But that does not mean that the West is, so evolved that they don't experience the same. It's, it's typified by the rape culture and narrative that you see in societies, particularly here in the U.S., since that's where I'm located and I can speak to that, but also in terms of veiled and unveiled aggressions against women, microaggressions against women, particularly women of color. It's even more so. And so when we come to the notion of self-care is a pivotal tool and is a pivotal point of reclaiming your power. So that's why I say self-care is radical. But what we also don't, hear a lot of is the consequences that comes from that. And a lot of those consequences, if you're not prepared for them, can be disheartening and can take you off of track. I've said it before where some people, you don't, if you're one of those undomesticated women, if you're ready to be undomesticated, if you're ready to be, freed from the conditioning that women have been subjected to throughout history and throughout the centuries and continue to be conditioned to, i.e. like the superwoman complex where you give away all the parts of yourself till there's nothing left, and then you put this false face on and say, oh, I can do it all, which is a lie. But when you look at that, you can understand, you get some inkling of where I'm going with this. Self-care is radical. Let's start there. Because self-care, anything that disrupts the status quo is radical. And self-care is just that, radical. It's a disruptor of the status quo. And that's why I say a lot of times too, you have, some women that, yes, you say, well, you're domesticated. Are you content to be domesticated? And some women have made that choice that they would rather remain in the status quo rather than deal with the consequences of being undomesticated, the consequences of breaking that conditioning. And this is what I want to speak to today. Breaking conditioning, breaking status quo, disrupting. That requires a level of strength that you have to develop. Because when you first start self-caring, when you get into that mode where you're breaking conditioning and cycles of that are toxic regarding how you value yourself, and that has a lot to do with it, how you've been taught to value or not value yourself and your well-being, accepting certain types of behavior being perpetuated against you, even unintentionally giving away your power because you've been conditioned to do so. When you begin to reclaim your power, you are in essence creating boundaries, and you're creating and negotiating, renegotiating rules of engagement. For instance, when you begin to reclaim your power, you are reclaiming your time. And you begin to say, you know what? I need some time here. I'm going to set myself apart so that I can recharge, so that I can feed myself, so that I can nourish myself, so that I can give myself what it needs. Not that your needs and desires, XYZ, don't matter. Not that the things that are important to you don't matter, but I matter. When you begin to adopt that mindset, that is disruptive. And it is going to cause friction. Whether people will admit it or not, that causes friction. And let me also tell you that in some instances, is going to sever certain ties, certain relationships, because what you require for your own self-care, for your own empowerment, is no longer acceptable to those various entities. Let us be sincere. For those who have benefited from time, for your lack of power, from your disempowerment, that is no longer, that's to some, that is not acceptable. Others might, be willing to renegotiate, but you've got to understand, not everybody that is with you is for you. And when you recognize that, as you empower yourself, as you begin to reclaim yourself, your time, and all of that, that is going to be a point of contention. And it's going to also be a point of where you break ties. Because as you begin to grow and develop and, really nourish yourself and really get mindful about what you need and who you are, and really beginning to reclaim those parts of yourself, becoming whole, you begin to realize too that not everyone you meet along your journey will go with you to the, the end. You must be willing, you yourself must be willing to let go. Some relationships, some ties you fight to keep and you nourish and you maintain, but others that do not serve your higher good or cannot for whatever reason serve your higher good, you have to be willing. You have to grow sufficiently. You have to strengthen yourself sufficiently that you can let that go. And that's why I speak of unintended consequences of self-care that nobody tells you about, especially in the larger media. There's a lot they don't talk about, and this is one of the things they don't talk about, because what is applicable in self-care in terms of empowerment, reclaiming who you are, is applicable to all areas of your life. And so when you take that beyond the individual to the group, to the society at large, that begins to become disruptive. And there's certain forces and entities that benefit from certain segments of the population being disempowered or not knowing that they have power or reclaiming their power. And women are a large segment of that population. The same thing applies for different ethnicity, different ethnic groups and cultures that have been marginalized by society, by the dominant cultures and societies in which they live. You can take that. You can also apply these same set of principles in self-care to this larger body. And so I truly believe this is one of the main reasons why we have such a distorted image of what self-care is and don't or play down consequences of self-care. So I just wanted to bring that to the fore and welcome everybody back to Freedom at the Crossroads, Balanced Living for Women. And just to give you guys just a little bit of a taste of what you can expect going forward at, here at Freedom at the Crossroads. You guys are awesome for sticking with me. And I truly believe we can grow as a community of women and just be prepared to start getting some, more of this. And we're going to be talking a lot more about, DIY skincare, because I got to have a rant about skincare and the cosmeceutical industry. Yes, ladies, I'll be bringing more info to you about that, and we can have that discussion and all things related to self-care in terms of natural remedies too. We're gonna get some more. Definitely get some guests on to talk about that, particularly some ladies on Clubhouse. Going to definitely get them on about that. And we are going to have some fun, and we are going to commiserate here in our tribe of women and really get the ball rolling in terms of broadening our reach and our scope of topics here at Freedom at the Crossroads. So stay tuned for more. This is Tonya, your host from Freedom at the Crossroads and founder of freedomatthecrossroads.com. Definitely find us on all of your audio podcast platforms. You can find us on Spotify and all of that. And definitely check out the Undomesticated Woman podcast as well that just got rolled out a couple weeks ago. And you can follow me on Instagram at Tonye, Tonye, Health, Tyria Health, Tariah Health on Instagram. You can also follow the Undomesticated Woman on Instagram as well. So definitely share and connect with us here. It's been an awesome time here, and I just wanted to briefly come on board and let you guys know what's going on. So till next time, self-care, 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 and get ready for the ride, ladies. Till next time.